with additional development time of the same of the village. This is the projections of the socioeconomic data. It's job number and population numbers. You can see from first table is job growth numbers. We have baseline 2020 job number there. We have forecast 2055 job number by county showing there. And overall, in this region, 3 counties are all developed very fast, you see, from in terms of jobs, number of jobs. And Chatham County, because the baseline number is low, so it has over 100% growth there. Durham County also very fast growth, 90%. Champ Hill still fast, but lower than the Durham. The second table shows population growth. Still, Chatham County and Durham County overperforms than the Orange County. Orange County relatively lower compared with Durham and Chatham County. Sorry. If you compare these 2 tables, you will find the job numbers growth, job growth outpaced population growth. So in other words, in this area, the assumptions for this alternative scenario is the job grows faster than the populations. So that's this 2 table. Here's the 2 table. First table shows transportation supply, the input. So we have this 3 alternative scenario. We have triangle regional model covers both our TPO and Campo Raleigh. Together, it's one model. So we input these assumptions together with Campo's input. We run the model. So the input data for the transportation supply are 2 measures I show here. One is roadway lane miles, how many lane miles increased. Secondly is transit service mile. You can see the plan and the trend, the first alternative scenario increased more on the roadway, while the last 2 scenario increased more transit service miles. So that's the first table. The second table shows the output from the model. So what's vehicle mile traveled increased and what is the vehicle hour traveled increased, as well as the transit passenger mile. So for the first scenario, focus on the highway, you can see with the more investment on the highway, you will see the VMT is increased. In other words, people may travel longer. They may have more trips. On the other hand, the congestion is down. You can see 2.5% of vehicle mile traveled reductions there. So for the second and the third scenario, share leadership and altogether, you can see the with investment more on the transit, the vehicle mile travel decreased and the VHT decreased as well. But the passenger mile increased because people choose the transit mode more for these 2 scenarios. So that's these 2 tables. One is shows the model input, the other shows the performance of the model output at the system-wide level, as a TPO, as overall. That's the things. And this slide also further shows regional level output. VMT per capita, VHT per capita. Second table shows passenger traveled hours. That means the passenger, how many hours use the transit service. So for the first table, mostly 30 miles per person daily in general, but with slight changes on the vehicle mile per capita. That's vehicle mile traveled measures we use frequently. We show in this slide. These two maps contains two-dimension information. The first dimension is the volume. The wide of center of the each lines means high volume, and the thin and the narrow lines means lower volume. But this is not focused on these two, for these two maps. We are focused on the second dimension is a congestion level. We use a vehicle volume over roadway capacity ratio as one of the measure for major congestion. If it's over one, VC ratio over one, we see it's highly congested. If the ratio in between 0.8 and 1, we see some congestions. So it shows in yellow, and if over 1, it shows red. So if you look these two maps, red area is highly congested, while yellow some congestions. System-wide, you can see I-40, US-70. So on the right-hand side, baseline scenario, is congested. If we do nothing, we only assume 4-year investment to 2028, the budget, you can see highly congested Durham Freeway from eastern end connector to I-40 and US-70, I-40, yeah, that I-85 in Orange County part. That's a highly congested area. So the left-hand side map shows the plan and trends scenarios. We said earlier is a highway investment scenario. And you can see after investment on the US-70 project, it kind of solves the issue, if you mean the issue is congestion only, but it shifts the congestion to the north area, I-85, north of Eastern End Connector. Similar situation for the US 15501, you invest in poor on some sections, other part may get the congestion to receive the congestions. So that's from this comparisons of these two maps. So this maps is similar, but instead of we compare the vehicle volume, we compare the passenger volume to see how it looks like. The red is showing relatively overwhelming on the bus. You see it high congest. It's 1.5. 1.5 means 3 person on the car, 3 passenger, 2 head seat, 1 stand there. So that's our measures there. Due to the time, we don't explain this in detail. This one, the last slide, is shows the BRT we test in these 3 alternatives. So we have Champion BRT, North-South BRT. So then we add in the Durham Orange BRT. Then the third one is from Duke University, Durham Downtown Station, all the way to the RTP. And we have the Champion UNC to RTP BRT in the test as well. So the last BRT is US-70 BRT. As you can see, the right shape of US-70 BRT right shape is very low. It's not this time, but from previous studies and model result, the US-70 BRT always shows very lower right shape BRT line, BRT right shape. So it's not trigger BRT, we just add bus line there, not add BRT. So the rest of BRT is there. That's for all the BRT we test. And also we receive a new BRT line information from city consultant after this alternative analysis is for the Central Durham BRT lines. So we test it as well. It will be incorporated in the final scenario as one of the BRT line in the MTP study. When we prepare this slide, we haven't got the result there, but ride shape daily is around 12,000, 12K to 14K is that range numbers. And this is not for the project forecasting, it's only for the MTP regional level studies. So it may not very accurate. When you get into detailed project level study, there will be another level, detailed levels of forecasting of the ride shape to support the project. So we just want to say this is MTP level studies and ride shape. So that's all my presentation. Any questions?
First of all, thank you, Yanping. I don't think we got to officially recognize you as one of our senior transportation planners at the Triangle West. So thank you so much. Yeah, I have requested that this come to us because as you I'm sure picked up on the fact that this is about integrating land use and planning. And so, you know, which plan that we adopt at the MTP level, and Councilmember Javier and I are both members of that, of the MTP, and also Vice Chair Lee is on the Triangle Board. I think it's really important that we are all working together, and I'm really interested too in how the decisions that we make with the UDO rewrite and with our new land use plan, have making sure that everything is supporting each other and coordinated. I also want to make the point that everything that we may ask for in you know, city transportation, Durham County transportation, it needs to be in the MTP in order for us to apply for federal funding. So that's another reason that it's, I think, important for us to be very aware of this process. I will stop here and open it up to comments or questions. You know, this stuff is all really complicated and it's really hard to look at just on PowerPoint slides. So yeah, oh yeah, go ahead, Doug.
So thank you, Yanping, for presenting that. Commissioner Jacobs, you're exactly right. There's a lot that goes into this. The city-county updated comp plan is definitely part of the we didn't go through all of the land use modeling. It goes into the socioeconomic projections that are layered into this transportation network modeling effort. My big takeaway and what I want to make sure that is conveyed, the number of jobs that we anticipate in this region is close to the same number of people we think are coming to this region. One person does not equal one job. So a significant portion of the jobs that we are locating here, because Durham City, Durham County region has done such a great job with unlocking economic development and that power for our residents, that we don't have space for all the people that need to come here to do those jobs. So it's going to exacerbate the housing jobs mismatch that we have now for local land use decisions and how we address it. I wish I had a solution to that problem, but identifying that again, I think it's my big takeaway from this discussion.
Thank you. And also at the MTP level, we asked that we have more mapping of where the jobs are, because that's going to determine where people need to go. We know that actually it's Durham and Wake County is where the jobs are going to be. And so we also have to make sure that people can get back and forth that way. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you all here. I just want to say this is the second time folks have Matt Day presented from Central Pines on some of our population data in the fall, if I'm not mistaken, and I think that was helpful as well. I just really want to reiterate the point of the jobs to people. Capturing folks to stay in Durham is good for Durham. So we do need to figure out how we are expected to grow, I think, 1.5 million, if I'm not mistaken, between now and 2055 for the whole region. most of those folks are in Wake and Johnston County. Orange County is seeing very little population growth.
Yeah.
Chatham County is seeing some, but that's a competition. So to Doug's point, it's better for all kinds of reasons to make it so that our housing is at a space where we can actually absorb some of those residents. We really want folks to work, play, and live in Durham County. We understand that folks have lots of choices across the triangle, but we want to incentivize folks to choose to live and work here. The jobs are going to be here. It's better from environmental perspectives. It's better from budgeting perspectives to not lose residents to Wake and Johnston County because we don't have sufficient housing for them. So I just want to lean into that. We have really great data. We have really incredible partners at the TPO. I do want to also highlight that TPO went through some big rebranding this year. There's some great videos and some other marketing that's being pushed out. So I just want to thank Doug and his staff for all the great work they've been doing. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. And just to piggyback on what you just said, we also want to make sure that people can get to the jobs in Durham without a car, or at least have the option, right? And we know there's a lot of, economic mobility data is really tied to transportation. You can have great jobs in your community, but if people are not equitably able to access those jobs, then people are not going to benefit from them. So, yeah, go ahead.
Just to include in that, we often think of transit as just buses or buses, BRT, whatever. But we're also, this is where the money we're putting into our trail system becomes an actual way for folks to get around. E-bikes have really, in fact, the mayor just rode down the hallway on his e-bike. It really does open up the possibility for how folks are commuting to and from. And we understand that work is changing and work is flexible, but for the most part, at this point, people are showing up in person at least a few days a week. And there's lots and lots of jobs where there is no choice. You have to be in the space. And I think about the biotech industry in particular, and I think about the lab work. That's in-person work. And so I think that that's the other part that we have to be really open and transparent with residents is these commitments to the rail trail, to the trail to Roxborough. It's also opportunities for transit that we're not really, hasn't traditionally been, captured in that way. But those investments matter as well, not just BRT and hopefully an incredible S-line sometime in the future that gets folks all through the triangle. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I think that's a great observation. I'd like to really commend Commissioner Jacobs and Councilwoman Caballero for their time on the MPO board. When I arrived to this organization about 3 years ago, the MPO board had changed some positions, and in the previous metropolitan plan, established some policies about road widening and not just adding lanes when a model shows congestion. And the work Yan Ping and his team have done show that when we invest in public transportation, the same model that shows congestion that the highway planners point to as why we need funding to build more highways shows that there's a performance improvement, a significant one, for public transportation use and mode shift if we invest in public transportation, not motorized. So, that is playing out in front of us. This is the state of the practice model. All models are wrong. Some models are useful. There's a lot of data that goes into this. If we compare it nationally, we're very proud of the work that we, along with Canto and partners at the NCDOT and NC State University that work on this model with us. And the model is showing what's truly happening in this region. So.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yeah.
Thank you for coming in and presenting to us. Just want to ask, so you're kind of taking this on the road. What do you want the takeaway? So you emphasized growth in jobs. You emphasized the importance of transit over just increasing the number of lanes on roads. Are there other key takeaways that you're trying to convey to the communities that you're presenting to? And how does this scenario planning process really meaningfully affect and impact the other work that you all are doing at the NPA.
Great, thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about the results, the outcomes we'd like with this presentation. We're not presenting this to every group across the region. We are unleashing public input opportunities for the alternatives analysis and preferred alternative development at destination2055.com. We'll check that and get that, which is a combined public engagement opportunity we have with Campo. We'd like people to go on and work through the surveys and opportunities and mapping exercises we have to tell us what's important to them, whether it's the project that's close to their house or whether they think we should be investing in public transportation or highways or non-motorized facilities. So that is our outcome. We'll have that public comment period open for a bit longer. We're also meeting with staff at the 3 different NCDOT highway divisions that operate within this region in concert with their assigned local jurisdictions. So we'll be meeting with Division 5 and Durham City County. I think we're talking through alternatives this Friday, and then we're meeting with Division 7, which is out of Greensboro and encompasses Orange County and the 3 towns that are our members there, Hillsborough, Chapel Hill, and Carborough, and then Division 8, which is out of Carthage in Moore County, covers Chatham County. So we'll be meeting with them. Sort of work through those preferred plans. For example, we've already gotten some feedback about what alternatives would be preferred for the Duke and Gregson Street projects. So we're going to take that input, and we've already begun updating our model to accommodate it and understanding the outcomes of that. So it's a little bit of an iterative process where, again, we have public input opportunities, and we are communicating directly with officials and staff that are with our members.
Destination2055nc.com.
Destination2055nc.com. Thank you.
So the other takeaway, so as we present today, is mostly at a regional level. We have hundreds of projects and service for the highway, for the transit, for the staff at TPO. We looked at details into each project as one of the consideration whether we get it into the final plan or not. So that's another takeaway. We look detail, but generally we present to the public system level measures. And with that, the maps we show already.
Cool. Yeah, that's very helpful. I think when I hear the takeaway, and by the way, I mean, you presented so much rich data and information, and then when you say here are the takeaways and it's supported by this tailored, very in-depth modeling that we've been doing, I think that really strongly supports the key takeaways that are important. And so I appreciate that wording that you gave us, and I think that will be very helpful when speaking, to the public, because folks might knee-jerk reactions say we need to add lanes, and if you through the modeling can show, well, actually, if we put BRTs on, if we have a dedicated lane for BRT, you'll actually have a better experience as a driver. That's a very powerful statement. So. I think leading with the takeaways and support with all the supportive evidence that you've come up with is going to be useful in communication. So thank you for coming and presenting to us.
Well, thank you so much, and we look forward to everyone collaborating, because the land use aspect is so important. We're going to get whatever we build in terms of our built environment is the outcome that we're going to get. And this is similar to Vision Zero. So, it's all connected.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And Doug, I think you're up here too for the next presentation, at least introducing the Triangle West Vision Zero plan.
Well, fortunately, it's not me presenting it. It's
Yeah.
someone that has that led the project from our team, Colleen Yu. She's our transportation planning manager at Triangle West. So this was about a year-long process. We applied for a Safe Streets for All grant and we received it. And then we wrapped up that work last month, wasn't it? So we're very happy to get the project done, and it's a lot of rich data analysis and opportunity for improvement. So I'll turn it over to someone that's much more informed and expert on this to present to you. Colleen.
Thank you, and welcome, Colleen. And this is actually perfect timing because last month we heard from the Durham Vision Zero plan, so it's great to then hear
The
broad-
regional
Yeah,
perspective.
Yes.
Yes, well, thank you very much for having me. I'm Colleen McGee. I will share that, this was about a year-long effort of doing the plan. Our goal was to have the plan adopted in time for the Safe Streets for All funding opportunity, which is currently open through the end of this month, so that all of our member agencies would have an adopted regional safety action plan to draw from if they were going to seek funding for projects. So that was, the hoped for outcome for this, but I'm very proud of this plan, and Lauren and I did speak after she presented to you all. So I know that, she had a good experience presenting to you. I'm looking forward to sharing more about our regional level analysis and, what we came up with for implementation. So this is an overview of my presentation. It closely follows the actual planning document itself. I know there's a lot of information on here. I plan to go through it pretty quickly and give you a high-level overview to leave plenty of time for questions at the end. For the executive summary, what the basis for this plan is this safe system approach. And what we mean by that is these are system level changes that need to take place, and the focus at the base of that pyramid is about how we can change the system, with the more individual actions and efforts kind of at the top of that pyramid. So the base is really what can we do system-wide to make a difference? Looking at socioeconomic factors, changing things about the built environment, and then kind of we go up from there, the safety measures, and then lastly, education. Going a little bit further, we are all humans and we are going to make mistakes. So, taking that into account when we're making upgrades to our transportation network, we are trying to minimize injury by lowering speeds, and then really improving design on our roadways to support safer driver and user behaviors on the roadway. The vision for our plan was we are going to eliminate fatal and serious injury crashes on our roadways. And we are going to do this by implementing the safe system approach. Currently 2025, when we adopted our plan, our plan is to reduce serious injuries and fatalities on the roadway by 2035. That is 10 years from now, which is tomorrow in transportation planning. So we really need to make some serious targeted efforts right now to make a difference. And then we'll be eliminating all fatal, serious, and injury crashes by 2050. This is consistent with the North Carolina DOT's goals. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our crash analysis that we did at the regional level. We looked at the 7 years between 2017 and 2023. We killed 312 people on the transportation network during that time, and almost 1,000 people were seriously injured. And so when I'm talking about a serious injury, that's an incapacitating injury where someone went to the hospital and their life will never be the same after that. 17% of those crashes were bicyclists and pedestrians on the roadway. And that's important because these are the most vulnerable users on the network. So we did in our analysis kind of hone in on where we're seeing those vulnerable crashes take place. Going along with that, we did an equity analysis as part of our plan. That word is at the federal level, one that we're using less these days, or that we're being asked to use less these days. We kept all of the in-depth equity analysis in the appendix of our plan. The current federal guidance for the grant opportunity of Safe Streets for All is to look at US DOT areas of persistent poverty, which I will say we looked at both our analysis and this. There is very strong overlap and correlation between these areas. So you'll see the blue lines on the map are identified high injury network, and then the orange areas are those US DOT areas of persistent poverty. These are going to be the most vulnerable road users on the network that are living in these areas. And then this shows our high injury network coverage throughout the entire region. And I know it's probably very hard to see the graphics on the side, but these graphics show what percentage of the high injury network is the total roadways in that jurisdiction area. So in Triangle West, our whole region, it's about 65%. You'll see, you know, depending on the jurisdiction, for example, Hillsborough, 100% of their roadways were on the high injury network. So it's kind of interesting when you dig into the details of this. These are the high risk corridors and intersections. So looking at where the crashes are happening now is not enough. We want to be proactive and anticipate where crashes will happen in the future. And there are some identifying characteristics of our roadways that we can use to examine where that takes place. I know there's dots all over this high risk intersection map. You know, when we're talking about what's a high risk location, these are places where the speeds are high and there's a lot of volume of vehicles traveling through that area. Then we kind of dug deep into the weeds and looked at, for risk, you see all the little maps on the side here. We looked at pedestrian crashes, high risk. We looked at bicycle crashes and high risk, motorcycle crashes and high risk, speed and lane departure, which are all of the characteristics that we're seeing the most of crashes in our area. So I'll talk a little bit about the community engagement and input that we did for the process. We had a technical committee that met 3 times throughout the plan. This was made up of staff from our member jurisdictions. We hosted a safety summit kind of at the beginning of our planning process where we invited stakeholders from a variety of groups and community groups to attend and kind of kick off the whole effort. We hosted a couple of open house meetings, popped up at a lot of different local events, and had an online survey both at the beginning of the process and then once the plan was drafted at the end. Both of our open houses you'll see were in Orange County. That's because you all had your own Vision Zero planning effort happening in Durham, and we did not want to confuse people by showing up and asking them to engage multiple times on a Vision Zero action plan. But I will share that we worked very closely with the members of your City of Durham team to make sure that we were hearing the same feedback they were hearing and could incorporate it into the plan. And then, you know, I mentioned we popped up at a lot of local events. Many of those were in Durham. So you'll see some of those listed on here. This is some of the feedback we received through the online survey. And we really used this feedback in the next part of the planning effort, which was to identify what are the strategies and actions that are really going to make a difference with the plan. So this is the meat of the plan. How do we know how to fix these problems and create safer designs? So here's a list of different proactive countermeasures we will be using on our roadways to make a difference and start reducing serious injuries and fatalities. And we created a priority network for both intersections and corridors using these 3 criteria. So severity, reducing that kinetic energy associated with collisions, exposure, reducing the interactions where those potential collisions may occur, and then the risk of those collisions occurring. Here's a map of both the intersections and the priority corridors at the regional level. The darker the red, the higher a priority it is, and the closer to yellow, it's still a priority, but not as severe as the other locations. So I'm going to go quickly through some of the strategies and actions. We identified 12 different areas that we can focus on. You'll see that this bold one towards the bottom, post-crash care resources and problems, I am going to talk a little bit more about in a moment. But when we took these back out to the public in the spring, we heard, we don't know what you're talking about when you're talking about a separated bike lane or a RRFB. And so we created this visual guide to go along with that so people could understand what are these countermeasures, like what are we actually talking about, and help people see that and identify, oh yeah, this could work in my neighborhood, or I think this could work on this busy street. So speaking about post-crash care resources and programs, during that second round of engagement, we heard from Durham County EMS, and they said, hey, we want to make sure that this is listed on your strategies and actions, because we know about these post-crash care resources that we're hoping to implement in your community, and want to make sure if we apply for Safe Streets for All funding, that's included in your planning document. So making sure that when after a crash, if there's a severe injury, that we can do blood transfusions between that crash location and the hospital. So when it comes to implementation, we want to make sure that we are tracking how we're performing towards our goals. And the NPO actually sets safety targets every year. We do that at the beginning of the year. We've been doing it for years, but we wanted to our board members really encouraged us to dig deeper into how we can look at these safety targets and identify really where the issues are so that we can make a difference over time. So these are some of the metrics that we'll be looking at, and we created a target setting framework. So not just looking at the whole network, but what's happening on the NCDOT roads, where we'll need to partner with North Carolina Department of Transportation to make an impact in these areas. And then what's happening on the local roads, where we have total control over what happens on these roadways, so we can make changes today. And kind of zooming in on what's going on with pedestrian, bicyclist versus motorist. And then another really important thing is who's responsible for doing these strategies. The TPO, our big role is to develop these resources. One of our most important roles is we bring federal funding to our communities. So we'll be helping to identify and secure project funding for these projects, and then also helping to provide technical support to our members. NCDOT certainly has some responsibilities, and they were an important partner in putting together this plan. They actually helped fund part of the plan. And then what are our member agencies? What can they do? Adopting safety-focused plans and policies, I would say you're already there. But then initiating safety programs and projects and taking action to respond. And just quickly, there's a lot in our appendices, a lot of really rich information that is meant to be a resource for our member communities. So we shared what was the methodology we did to create the plan so that it could be replicated. This is the really detailed equity analysis that we did for the plan, which includes looking at all of the existing conditions in certain areas, and then 8 different types of populations and where we're seeing those concentrations within our area. A lot of them are in Durham. Detailed overview of engagement and input. We have a huge section on member agency maps. So one of the things our members had asked for when we were scoping this was each agency wants their own analysis as part of the plan. So Town of Hillsborough wants to know what they need to do, and Town of Chapel Hill wants to know what they need to do, and Durham County wants to know what they can do. And so we have a really large section that includes maps for each community and analysis going along with that. That includes high-risk locations along bike, ped, motorcycle, speed, and lane departure. And last but certainly not least, we have some really important deliverables that go with the plan so that communities can use the plan as a resource. We have identified, what are the different policies and programs that can have a significant impact. And we've created some project development resources. So a huge data set that includes all of those crashes for the last 7 years that I mentioned, which I know Lauren has used, putting together the Vision Zero action plan already. And then going along with that, a countermeasure toolkit. So we know what's the problem with the crash, and then how do we identify how to select a solution for that problem that we're going to apply for funding for. Here's some examples. And with that, I will turn it over to you all.
Well, great presentation, Colleen, and I think both this plan and what we heard before with the MTP, I think exemplifies the incredible value that we are getting as a member of Triangle West TPO. I mean, work that is based on data analysis, engagement this is just a phenomenal resource for everybody. So thank you. Questions, comments?
Yeah, thank you for this presentation. This in combination, like you were saying last meeting, is very informative how we move forward. I did have a question just in general. I'm not sure it is directly addressing it, but it's slightly addressing it. You talked about the elimination of wrecks, accidents, and and one of the methods was speed reduction, right?
Exactly.
What levels of speed reduction do we get to the point where there's no accidents, right? And I'm curious about that. I spent a week in India last month, and there's tons of cars. It is wild how they travel in India, but they don't travel fast, and they don't have many accidents. And when I hear that, when I hear speed, I think about that. However, that's a different environment than here. You have a lot more space between cars and pedestrians and so forth. But what does speed reduction really look like? There's obviously a number posts, but what does that look like education-wise, law enforcement-wise? Well, not necessarily law enforcement, but enforcement-wise, and so forth in this region. What does that look like?
Yeah, I will say safe speeds, it really depends on the context. So on a neighborhood street, a safe speed is going to be a lot slower than it would be on a highway. But the main goal here is to give people more reaction time. So when there is somebody walking across the street, you have enough time to slow down before there's a collision. And then putting in countermeasures, like all the pictures that I shared earlier, that we can use to help kind of slow cars down enough so that the pedestrian has enough time to react, the other vehicle has enough time to react, when it's a vehicle to vehicle collision, that there's enough time to slow down. But the slower the speed, the less likely someone is to get killed or seriously injured. I don't know if I can answer your question exactly, because like I said, it really depends.
Yeah, and I understand that.
Yes.
I definitely get that. But I'm just wondering if the goal to eliminate that is a stretch more than reduce it to a certain percentage, right? Because it feels like it's always going to be there, and I know it's a goal to eliminate. How we communicate that, if it's actually realistic to say,
To reduce human error
zero
in the process.
right.
Yeah, it's an ambitious goal.
Yeah. And I appreciate the goal. I like the goal. It's just thinking about how we communicate that in a realistic manner, I guess.
I would just say, part of the difficulty with not having total and complete success on Vision Zero is what would be an acceptable goal? And is there a number that's not zero that is? And I don't know that. I think there is.
Well, I think, looking at it as a total elimination is a great goal, but I look at things in a improvement manner. So, okay, can we improve? Okay, next time, next round, how do we improve? How do we improve? It is like in math, what is it? How you're always moving towards zero. You don't ever get to zero, in like parabolas and summation notation, all that kind of stuff. It's like as X approaches zero, you don't necessarily get to zero, but it's approaching how do we improve continuously. But I hear you, and I don't think one is acceptable, right? But just thinking about how we look at this. Just me, that's just my thoughts.
Sure. Well, you're exactly right. As we report and as we set different interim targets, there is an acknowledgement. And it's very few places across the country are having a significant reduction as we would like to see, but there are some great partners, and there's even some states that have had worse safety issues in North Carolina, in the Southeast, Alabama, Mississippi, that have made huge gains already in these programs. So there is some optimism there.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation. And I think that any improvement at this point, like regardless what the goal is, we get this data every year, like in January,
Yes.
CPO, and all we see is an increase in deaths. We don't see any decrease in deaths. It's gotten worse. And Gregson and Duke and Gregson are the two pairs that are the highest injury network in the whole network. And every year we just see that number get worse. So like, I don't, to Doug's point, any direction in the opposite way is going to be a good direction. And I think to your point about, I've been in Mexico City, it's one of the largest several times. You see a lot of chaos and you don't see a lot of dinged up cars. And I think part of it is you have lots of different users of that network and it forces people to slow down. So it's not just cars, it's because there's lots of folks in different ways that they're commuting and moving about. And so you can't just assume, you get like a shark when you're in a car, right? Like I just see the fish, I just see it. You can't actually think about, oh, I see a motorcycle, I see a scooter, I see a bike user, I see a pedestrian, and that's design. And so the way we can make that better is by ensuring that we are creating a system that allows different users. We're not prioritizing one user constantly. And over time, what we do know is like, education is a piece of that, but if you want the biggest bang for your buck, it's actually on the design side of things. And then education is like a nice to have, right? But if the thing is designed super wide and designed for this big metal thing, people are going to go fast. It's just by default. I'm not talking about like 147 or any of those things. Those are limited access. Like on those roads, I actually don't care how fast people go. But on like neighborhood streets, ensuring that the lanes are narrower, that you actually have cars parked on it, that you're creating things that are visually blocking, it's not just this big wide thing where you're like, oh, I've got all the space in the world and I'm not even prepared for a pedestrian that's walking across. And so that's where the built environment becomes so critical. And I do want to just shout out in our CIP this year, we have funding for both Gregson and Duke and Mangum and Roxborough, and that's where we need to put a lot of our money is on these city streets to change how folks move so that we can have less dangerous roadways in the city. I think most of us on council are taking the bus now or riding bikes at least some of the time, and I think we've made that decision consciously, and it does make you a lot more aware of how vulnerable you are and how big cars, especially in the US, are. And that's another thing that we can't control, but the size of our vehicles has increased a ton, and it does create a safety issue, and that's beyond our control. But I think that there's plenty of examples all over the world that have way more people, and you do not see the dinged up cars and the just pedestrian deaths that we see in this country.
Thank you. Councilmember Baker.
Thank you so much for coming and presenting to us and conducting all of the work that you've been doing. I think what this presentation shows is that autocentric development is deadly. It's deadly. I mean, the numbers that you showed, and there's a story behind every single one of those people that has died or been seriously injured. It's a public health emergency and epidemic, and it's preventable. And we know it's preventable because peer cities in other parts of the country and peer cities in other parts of the world have a fraction of the per capita deaths and injuries that we have. We know it's possible. We know it's preventable. And we just kind of accept it. It's like we become numb to the number of people that die and get injured on our streets. And it's not just immediate crashes, which we're sort of talking about here. It's also the health implications of burning fossil fuels and people who live there, and the noises that are created, the costs, household costs and municipal and county costs of wide road construction and maintenance. I mean, it's completely out of hand at this point, and so much money is going toward it. And we need to move away from auto-oriented, auto-dependent development, both within the public right-of-way and outside of the public right-of-way in the private realm, and auto-centric development. So one question I have is, I've seen like North Carolina Department of Transportation has issued complete street skylines and those kind of things before. Sometimes I feel like it's Groundhog Day. I've seen traffic engineers point at a road that's got 14-foot lanes and a painted bike lane and a small little sidewalk and said, that's a complete street. And what I see is, go ahead, die, on this road if you dare to get on a bike and go on that street. So how do we make sure that we are actually moving in a different direction? How do we actually implement best practices designs, not just incrementally slightly better than it is today, but how do we make sure truly that we are moving in a completely different direction when it comes to the public right-of-way and the streets that we build and maintain?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thank you for bringing it up. Most of the roads on that high injury network are NCDOT owned and operated roadways, because those are the roadways with the highest volumes of traffic, the widest, the highest speeds. And so they're a critical partner in this effort. I think, having them be part of the whole regional planning process is an important step. They know what the issues are now in our area and what are the countermeasures we expect to see on those roadways. I will say, Doug and I are both fairly new to the MPO. I've been here 2 years. Doug's been here 3 years, as he mentioned. One of the things we've been working on is building those relationships with our North Carolina Highway divisions. So in Durham, it's Division 5, and making sure that we're really partnering closely together on making a difference. So it doesn't totally answer your question, but in my experience working in Florida for 12 years before this, Florida DOT really it does still take safety very seriously, and Complete Streets is integrated into the Florida Design Manual. They have a context classification system for, what the roadway is. Is it rural? Is it urban? Is it suburban? And then what are the countermeasures that DOT engineers will do to improve safety? And that's something I would love to see our DOT start moving towards. So we're working on them. Is there something you would like to add to that, or not to put you on the spot? But
I will add also that a lot of times we see safety improvements when there's some necessary safety funding that needs to be spent. It's not part of the typical project development process. We are advocating for that. We're advocating for the state to place a higher priority on funding projects that have a clear safety benefit. As part of, not only our Vision Zero plan, but the city of Durham's work, we want to make sure that any new project, not just one that's safety driven, any new project goes through a road safety audit process to make sure that there are context specific solutions delivered as part of that design. So we don't just end up with, okay, here's the cross section we want, this is what it looks like here, and let's go build it, but that we evaluate exactly what needs to be fixed with safety in mind.
Well, I thank you very much for your hard work. And it is hard and it is so important. And just want to emphasize that this is such important work. And I know, there's God and there's NCDOT. The task ahead is incredibly challenging. And I just want to show appreciation to that and want to emphasize how much of a change we really do need in the way that we build and maintain our streets and our roads. And to Commissioner Jacobs' earlier point, the land use is so critical as well, because that is what induces the dependency upon the automobile. And so that's the work that we have tasked for ourselves as well. So thank you so much for coming and presenting to us.
Thank you. And, first step is always to have a plan. Having an adopted plan and integrating the plans into our process. So that's why this plan is so important, as well as the Durham plan, because one of the leverage points that we have is that when we are considering, when NCDOT wants to fund something, we can say at the TPO level or at the local level, yes, we can do that. We will provide funding for this as a partner, or we will approve this, but these are the things that we need to see that are in our adopted plan. So that's, that this step is very, very important. And I don't remember, I know Doug, you were there, the speaker at the Carolina Theater about a year ago, who talked about how we are can retrofit our current environment and how we should, and he called out NCDOT on this, saying that we need to stop building new roads, period, and should be focusing on retrofitting our existing roads and maintaining our existing roads to make them safe. I don't know if you recall who that was. It was, who I'm talking about.
I do, and the name
Yeah.
that's escaping me.
Yeah, but anyway, that has really, really stuck with me. So I'm excited about we are positioning ourselves to move forward with actually implementing. And I love the visual guide is so awesome. It's really, really helpful for everybody. And this just feels so user friendly, for at all levels. So again, appreciate your all's work on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us and your grace and letting us talk about our exciting work for much longer than we suggested we would be talking about it. As a native Durhamite, I'd like to thank all of you as well for your dedication and attention to these very important issues in our community. And please, continue your hard work and supporting your fine staffs at Durham City and Durham County as you take on how to address growth in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, yes, we are over time. Consolidated case summary, Peyton Burgess.
Let's make a restart.
We had to restart the system about that.
Sorry, everybody, we're getting the one presentation pulled up really quick.
Yeah, we had to restart early and we have to get it back up. Under pressure.
I'll go ahead and kind of just get started. I think that you guys should have everything in front of you, and then we can get the PowerPoint just pulled up as we go along. But good morning, everybody. My name is Peyton Burgess with the Planning Department. And I am here to present the consolidated cases. Just a reminder, this is a quarterly summary that we bring to you guys of all of the consolidated annexations that also have zoning map changes associated with them. And all of these cases are actively under review right now. Thanks, Chris. So we'll start out with Sharon Road assemblage. It is a request for 11.31 acres located along Sharon Road. There's an associated rezoning that is requested to go from industrial light with the graphic development plan, residential suburban 20, and residential rural to plan development residential 34.426 and commercial general with a textual development plan. I will say for this case, you can see there's an aerial map instead of the zoning context map. Because it is still under review, we're actually waiting for the meets and bounds for what they're trying to do as far as the new zoning line. So we've just included the aerial map as opposed to the zoning context map for you guys. Next is 3306 Page Road. This is a request for 1.81 acres located at 3306 Page Road, and they're requesting to rezone from residential rural to PDR 8.876 to allow for 15 townhomes. Next is Patterson Hall. This is a request for 38.873 acres located along Patterson Road, and they're requesting to rezone from residential rural and residential suburban 10 to plan development residential 4.964 for up to 190 dwelling units to be a mix of townhouses and attached houses, with 5% being affordable and up to 3,000 square feet of non-residential building area. The next case is Enclave at Little Creek. This is a request for 45.945 acres located at 5524 George King Road. And their request is to rezone from residential suburban 20 to plan development residential 5.005 to allow for up to 230 townhouse, multiplex, and apartment units with a minimum of 20% being income restricted at 80% AMI for 30 years. And then finally, we have the Britmore. This is a request for 26.668 acres located along Farrington Mill Road. And they are requesting to rezone from residential rural to plan development residential 4.312 to allow for up to 115 townhouse and single family detached residential units with a minimum of 5% being income restricted at 80% AMI for 30 years. So again, these cases are currently all under review, and I can answer any questions that you all have.
Thank you so much for this information. When I looked at these, there are a few things that jumped out at me. One was they are all within the urban growth boundary, so really glad to see that. That means that our adopted plan is working. We want people to come forward with rezonings that are in the urban growth boundary. And, you know, some of these are infill. One in particular, the one that's only on 1.81 acres, is a representative of an infill project. I also want to note that I think it was at least 2 of them were including residential with non-residential use. Again, that is really good to see because that is again consistent with our land use plan of wanting to have more integrated uses, people ostensibly being able to walk to some other use from their neighborhood. And the third thing I wanted to really recognize also was that 3 of these already are talking about affordable housing. At this point, of course, things can change over time. It was especially notable that one of them is the Enclave at Little Creek is talking about 20% income restricted, 80% AMI or below for up to 30 years. So, you know, that's again the kind of thing that we do want to see. I do want to just was at the Housing for New Hope breakfast yesterday, I do want to raise one thing I think that we all should be aware of. And I don't know how we're tracking this, but this, according to this report, that it's estimated that Durham needs 10,700 affordable housing units, according to the National Low Income Housing Coalition by 2024. I would be really interested in knowing where are we at within that number in terms of units that have either been proffered by developers during rezonings, or that are being funded by the city and the county, or that developers are, organizations are doing on their own, like the Durham Community Land Trust or Reinvestment Partners, just to know, how are we doing and how many units do we actually need to be developing per year to reach that goal. So that was, you want to respond to that? And then the second question. Go
Sure.
ahead.
Barry King with the planning department. So that is actually a project we're currently working on. Andy Lester and our team is compiling the information. And we're trying to make sure that we are clear as to an understanding and a differentiation between units that have been approved through the zoning process versus units approved through the site plan process versus units that are actually getting built, have building permits or COs and so forth. We want to make sure that we're painting that clear picture. And those are all different sources of data that we're working on compiling right now, and we'll get that to you as soon as we can.
Okay, fantastic, because I think it'd be great to have a dashboard around that. And then the other point I just want to raise is that in the Housing for New Hope report, they said that development efforts should prioritize units for households earning less than 50% of the area median income. And, we typically see 80% AMI or below in these proffers. So just for us to be aware that there is a need for even, at different income levels. And that's maybe part of your analysis as well, right?
Let me chime in
Yes.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one of the things that that I think Aaron's gonna maybe cover is that when you're looking at the units that are being proffered, the majority of those, I think, at least now, are without subsidy, right? So the city, the county are not putting in any gap financing. Those units are not, developers that are doing that are not able to afford those deeper AMIs, right? That's why we see 80% quite often. Usually the lower you get, the more you're gonna need some sort of gap of coverage on the financing. That right now, the city's program has kind of come, the Forever Home program has kind of come to an end. So we continue to work with community development on, what they have kind of cooking in the pipeline. And I think we're looking forward to seeing what the next version that supplants their current program is, but I'll defer to Aaron to add more to that.
I have nothing more to add. You said it perfectly.
Yes, council member.
Thank you. I just want to speak to that a little bit, because of the housing work that I've been doing. That's why the housing data was compiled with HRNA and the chamber to really track what unit at what AMI. So that's not data we have. I mean, we're getting there. But to Director Young's point, anything under 80%, you're going to need a subsidy of some kind. So what we have seen in some cases is some developers, if the parcel is big enough, and quite frankly, none of these parcels are big enough, they will bring on an affordable housing partner who's maybe going to go after a 4% LIHTC. But if the parcel isn't big enough and there's not enough units, you're not going to get that. We have seen some, I think, especially out in Bragtown, we've seen some good successes with that kind of matchmaking of a for-profit developer with a nonprofit developer and affordable housing profit. What we've also heard from the development community is there's not that many partners and they don't necessarily have the expertise to play matchmaker. So that's another area where we need to, and this is not a planning part, this is not at JCCPC. How does the city or the county or whatever entity, probably the city because of community development, maybe do that vetting ahead of time? Do these affordable housing folks have the necessary insurance, all of the things, the financial structure, so that you are literally just playing matchmaker? Here's a list of verified nonprofit builders, for-profit developer, builder, here's how we can help you so that you can get to that deeper subsidy. But that's the work that we are doing. That's going to take some time. And then I just want to, the other thing that we've heard pretty consistently, that was one that they're kind of running into that wall of who I even work with. And then the other, and this is a risk for us, a lot of our affordable housing deals at this point are what we, are stacked. It's a 4%, it's maybe city gap funding, it's maybe some other thing. And it's also our voucher program. And if that voucher program gets decreased or goes away through HUD at the federal level, a lot of our affordable housing deals that are already currently slated, so we may be counting them in these units, if that gets changed at all, that project is not going to pencil out. They need that money. And then moving forward, that's just going to be a tool that folks can't use. And so we have to, as electeds, very, very much pay attention to what is happening in the HUD space moving forward. And again, that has nothing to do with planning, but it's a huge risk that we are hearing from affordable housing partners. Thank you.
Thank you for that context. And also, I serve on the Homeless Services Advisory Committee, and at our last meeting, there was great news that for a project for 30% AMI below, where the Durham Housing Authority had agreed to designate 25 site-based vouchers to go with that project, which means that financially, those projects can serve our most vulnerable and lowest income residents because of the site-based voucher, the funding that is provided by the federal money coming to the Durham Housing Authority. So that's an example to what you just said. And that's the kind of collaboration that we need to be ensuring as well, in coordination. So anyway, thank you so much. Any other comments on the consolidated cases? Okay. New UDO mapping concerns. Lisa Miller. No, not Lisa Miller.
Yes. I apologize in advance that I am not Lisa Miller, and Scott Whiteman from Planning Department, but Lisa's here to bail me out if I need anything. All right, so this morning we wanted to, for the first time in a little while, go over some of the comments that were received on the draft zoning map from the new UDO, and get some feedback from you all on how to address some of the stickier issues that are coming up. How did I make it work, Chris? Thanks. All right, so as a refresher, particularly for those of you who might be new to the board, with module 1, we had the consultant prepare a draft zoning map for the entire county. With this UDO, unlike previous ones, we are proposing to remap the entire county to have the new UDO match the recommendations as much as possible to the adopted comprehensive plan. So the consultant provided the map with based on initial kind of objective logic that relied mostly on the adopted place type, the existing UDO zoning, and whether or not it was in the urban growth boundary. After that, staff made some revisions based on conditions that on the ground that we knew about that our consultant didn't know about. We kind of took our first batch of map comments from March 14th and before and analyzed those to see what kind of feedback we were receiving. We've received 122 up to that point. Sure, there's probably more since then. We'll continually review these comments up until the adoption. So based on some of the feedback that we've heard through our public meetings that we heard online and from you all on the JCCPC, we've already made some kind of broad changes to kind of the logic that we were using or specific recommendations that we were making. One of the major ones that I think we've already reviewed with the JCCPC is that for any residentially designated property that's currently zoned RR, rural residential, or RS20, that is inside the urban growth boundary, but outside of the city limits, basically in the county zoning jurisdiction, was changed to RB instead of one of the more intense residential zoning districts. One of that too, we heard a lot of concerns from folks who lived in those areas that the RD district does not allow agriculture by right, and so a lot of those properties have small scale agriculture on them now, and they don't want those to become non-conforming. Also, there were some concerns, which has a lot of merit, that without water and sewer access, it would be impossible to develop these properties at the RD zoning or higher. And that while we're trying to work to make it easier to build things that we as the community want by right, if a property needs to be annexed, there's no by right way to do that. And they have to go through the full zoning process anyway to establish the city zoning, even if it's exactly the same as the county zoning. So we feel like this was a good compromise so that when, if properties remain outside of the city limits and are on well and septic, the zoning would allow low intensity development, but if they're annexed, then the city council can address what the appropriate zoning would be. Another thing, and that addressed a lot of the comments that we heard from the initial mapping. One of the other things we did, the CX district in our transit opportunity areas, the map logic created a lot of kind of a patchwork of the CX districts based on height. If you think areas like South Square, they've been zoned to lots of different things over the years. So we kind of refined the logic to make it more based on location. So properties that were directly adjacent to like an existing neighborhood, we would recommend CX3, which would only be 3 stories. And then on the flip side, if it was a property that's directly on a frequent transit route, we recommended CX8 for those, which would be 8 stories, since that would be more appropriate for intense development, which makes the zoning map look a lot more logical in those areas. We also, as we're working on where townhouses in the RX district are allowed by right or not, any apartment, townhouse, or designated property in the comprehensive plan that already had townhouses on it, we recommended RX3, no matter what the current zoning is. And then lastly, in order to help address potential nonconformities that might come out for civic uses in the R districts, R, A, B, C, and D, we've recommended rezoning any existing civic use, such as a place of worship or a school or something like that, to the CIV civic district, regardless of what the place type was. So that those would all be legally conforming uses once the new UDO is adopted. You can do the next slide, Chris. Yeah, this doesn't seem to be working. So some of the feedback we heard, some of it was very general, that we can't, as staff, you can't address these on an individual property by property basis. But want to make you all aware, because it's something you all will hear about probably a lot in the coming months. One is just, unsurprisingly, the general concerns about the pace and amount of development. We also heard, we got quite a few comments about the permitted density in the RD district, particularly in the RS10 and RS20 zone neighborhoods in the city, where that would represent kind of significantly more development potential than the current zoning would allow. And then lastly, one thing we want to get to a little bit more detail in the next few slides. We have what we call the RX infill sites in established residential areas. So as a little bit of context, one of the key recommendations from the comprehensive plan that we wanted to encourage a diversity of housing types in all neighborhoods. So as a result, the comprehensive plan recommended and the new UDO is proposing allowing higher density infill in the RD district for the established residential designated areas in the plan. Also allowing more types of missing middle. And then allowing a mix of housing types in the mixed residential and mixed use neighborhood place types, which are designed more for new greenfield sites. With that, there's quite a few well-established, mostly large lot single family neighborhoods that are located mostly in the western crescent of the city, I would say, where the houses are relatively high dollar. There are very limited opportunities for infill or redevelopment. So the approach to that to help encourage the mix of housing types was to identify the few infill sites that were left that were larger than a typical single family house in those neighborhoods, to designate those for apartment townhouse so that we could encourage and allow higher density, slightly higher density development on those infill sites so that we can maintain some opportunity for a mix of housing types. And so we've gotten quite a few comments on some of those, also unsurprisingly. And I should mention, if it was a single family zoning district already, we recommended the RX3, which is least intense multifamily zoning in the new UDO. So one site is 2500 Auburn Street. This was got by far the most comments on the map. This is in it's off Cranford Road, in kind of the greater Duke Forest area. It's a roughly 7-acre site. One of the only large sites in this area. So it was designated apartment townhouse in the comprehensive plan and is recommended for RX3. We've heard from many folks, including the property owner, Shar Clark, who's in the audience, that feel that there are some constraints on this site that would make it really hard to develop, including at the RX3 intensity, including a stream on the south and a previously unidentified cemetery on the kind of northern part of the site. So can you hit the next slide? So here's a similar one. This is off Garrett Road. We got a lot of comments on this as a comprehensive plan, got a few through the new UDO. This is another large lot single family area where there's only a handful of infill sites. And so this is another one that would be recommended for RX3, but there is some opposition from the neighbors. So what we're asking for is these types of things where there are property owners or neighbors who are opposed to the recommended zoning based on what was in the adopted comprehensive plan will keep popping up. Obviously not everyone was engaged in the comprehensive plan. A lot of folks, the comprehensive plan is not regulatory, so a lot of folks don't fully understand what the recommendations mean until we start talking about zoning. That's our previous comprehensive plan. That was almost always the case. So the step we'll keep addressing. We'll, as staff, if we can address them on a case-by-case basis, we will. But if there's a zoning options that we feel are a different zoning option that's still consistent with the comprehensive plan, we can recommend those changes. If there are sites that we think the changing conditions or better information means that we should change the comprehensive plan, we can address those in the 2-year updates. And there may be some sites where there's not really a good answer, and we'll just have to highlight those for the elected officials at the adoption phase. So with that, I'd be happy to take any feedback and answer any questions.
Thank you so much. And let me just say, I know that from my experience doing the first comp plan 25 years ago, and now this one, is that it's a broad stroke. And staff does not have the capacity to do a parcel by parcel analysis. And there's always going to be situations where the on the ground circumstances may need to be changed. We just had this happen at the county. We had a rezoning off of East Club Boulevard, and it was supposed to be a transit oriented area, but when we looked at it more deeply, it ended up, because of the way the access to 85 was, because of the environmental actual constraints on the property, that it didn't actually make sense for that one little parcel that was in. So that it's going to come up. I mean, there's no doubt about it, that things are going to come up and adjustments are going to be made. So I want to say I respect the staff recommendations personally when these types of situations come up. So go ahead.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. So broadly, taking the information that we heard at the beginning of this meeting, which is around transit, the modeling around population, if you took what y'all are doing here, because this is it, 25 years till we do it again. So we actually we have to get this right. The consequences are big. What I would like is that very high level. Does this UDO get us what our folks are saying in transit world, right? About what's coming, the jobs, how do we capture those folks? Does it actually marry? And if it doesn't marry, I don't want it. And I have no problem telling folks, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Or you're actually not even shooting yourself in the foot, you're shooting the kids who aren't gonna be able to afford a house here. There's a reason Orange County is not growing. It's because it's too expensive. There's a reason that Chapel Hill City Schools has a deficit. It's because there's not young families moving in. That's the tax base. Like I know that we want to fight around theories and things around that, but then we have to base our decisions as local leaders in a very constrained environment on money, on real things, on facts and on data, whether or not it, there's plenty of things that I entered in office about that I had a theory or an idea about, and then I had to look at the data and I had to back away from my thought. And that is, and we're going to get mad at the right for doing it. We got to look at ourselves when we're progressives and do the same thing. So what I want staff to do is to figure out that we have this incredible data, and are we going to get there and are we not? And then let us know, because I have no problem pushing folks as an elected. But if I don't have the staff really saying, yeah, you got to push, I don't know what to fight for out there, right? Or I don't know what to be real clear on with residents about. And I know that feels really hard for folks who are living in these communities now, but a lot of these folks aren't going to be here in 25 years, right? Or they're going to be in a very different stage of their life. They're not going to be in their home that they're in now. They're going to have moved potentially to a different type of housing, to a different part of the community within the city, just from their own stage of life. And so that's what I really need from staff, is at that high level. Does this get us what we heard we needed? Did this get us to that design built where we want a 15-minute city? We want folks to be able to walk down the street and get what they need or ride their bike. And that is density. Like, you don't get that if you don't have density. And I understand how that might feel as an individual user in this, or an individual homeowner, but things change, societies change, cities change. And we have to be brave enough to tell residents that that's what's coming. To your question around individual feedback, this RX3, I've asked for this before. Like, I've got my little table. I've said, like, I need visuals. I need, what does that look like, right? A 3-story building, right? Like, I think it would help for folks to really understand what that looks like. And I will own that I am not somebody who gets upset. Like, you living next to a 3-story building is not the thing that's going to cause me stress in my life. I'm sorry. There's lots of things that are going to cause me stress in my life, and that's just not one of them. So I need those visuals to help me. Okay, what does that feel like with this RX3 if that's what we're pushing? And then for the spaces where you all are saying, this is a established single family neighborhood. Again, things change. At a certain point, it's going to become cost prohibitive to maintain those large lots, and those people are going to sell, and that's going to get knocked down. And we want to make sure that the zoning that is allowed there gets us that level up. And I know, again, folks don't want to hear that because they have this idea of like very pristine, but that's what happens in cities as they become denser and they change. You don't see that unless you preserve it in amber, and only very, very affluent people can do that. So there's an incredible neighborhood, Hyde Park, Kenwood, in Chicago in the 70s and 80s. They preserved all of that. They're gorgeous homes from the Victorian era on huge lots. And they're $1.5–2 million homes, right? Like, that's what happens when we preserve things in amber, and only very elite people can live there. And I don't want my decisions to make it that only the elite get to maintain that, right? So I'm done on my soapbox.
Any other comments? Councilmember.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Can you remind me what is the intensity of the RB district?
RB district it's very similar to the current RS20 district, so it's basically half-acre lots.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just asking because, obviously there's this, the recent law that makes downzoning much more complicated. I would love for us to downzone everything outside of municipal limits to encourage, further encourage annexing into the city. You know, and obviously water sewer is a major reason to encourage that. So I think that makes sense, the changes to RB. Has there been any headway on this idea of making sure that we have the tools in our tool belt for creating complete communities out of the greenfield development that comes to the city?
So you might need to answer that one.
Yeah, Vote Brinsky, planning. I suspect that the answer to your question in terms of those design requirements will be in the next module, as we talk about infrastructure for new subdivisions. So we've begun the review of some of those standards, but that hasn't been released and still making some changes to that. Whether that's considered complete, I mean, yeah, we have to go through the details.
Sure. Yeah, I just want to keep bringing that up, because I just want to make sure that it is really easy and expected that when these large developers and large landowners come and annex big properties into the city, that the rules are in place or the tools are in place so that they are cohesive, at least somewhat walkable, you know, moving us in a different direction there on these large parcels. So want to make sure to emphasize that. And then what are the next chapters that we have that we can expect coming to JCCPC?
I'm the map guy, but Bo answers all the other questions.
Yeah, it's dependent. It's going to be dependent on the changes we're making and those reviews. I don't have the specifics. I mean, I'd love to say August, September.
Okay, now I'm just curious.
But I don't want to.
Y'all go at your pace.
I don't want to let you down in August.
Sure. And then I will say this. I think we need the density, diversity, and design, the 3Ds of walkability. We need all three, not just one, not just two. We need all three to be part of an integrated, walkable, transit-oriented city fabric, so that people can walk out their front door and get to the things and the places that they need to get to. Obviously, part of that is density. What I stand for when it comes to density is that we get corresponding public goods when we increase density. So if we're going to make if we're going to broadly upzone large swaths of our city, I want to make sure that we're also getting corresponding public goods in the form of affordable housing units, green building, high quality design, all those things, and not just kind of giving away density for free, especially given the recent law that was passed at the state level.
Thank you, Councilmember Baker. One of the things, particularly with these little RX3 infill sites, what we're trying to balance is there is definitely an opportunity if folks rezone to a higher intensity, that there are certain public benefits that can be negotiated out of that. But what we're seeing, a lot of these kinds of sites get cut up into exempt plat lots that meet the current zoning, and because it's already in the city, we're already legally required to provide sewer and water service to them. And it's way easier to do an exempt plat and put a big house on there, partly to Councilmember Caballera's point, than it is to go through the rezoning process. So we'll have to, and that may be to Chair Jacob's point, as we look at each one on an individual basis, have to look and see what are the trade-offs. So for example, the property on Auburn Street has no street frontage, so you can't do an exempt plat on that one. So there's little risk for that. But on Garrett Road, you could easily cut that up. And we actually there's a similar site further north on Garrett Road where that's already happened. So yeah, I know that's not an answer, Councilmember Baker, but I just want to make sure that
I understand the balance, and I understand the trade-offs here. I just want to make sure that, for example, if today you can build a building on a site that's on an arterial road. You can build a 3-story building. If we're proposing that you can now build a 7-story building, I want to make sure that those extra 4 stories, that of those extra 4 stories, that a percentage of that needs to go to a public good, a public benefit. So affordable housing units or some other public good. I think that's important through some sort of density bonus, by right density bonus process.
Yeah, and just one more point, we're also trying to balance is it consistent with the comprehensive plan, at least the bare minimum of the comprehensive plan, the zoning we're proposing, and with the point, like, if it's currently 3 stories and it's about to be 8 stories, then that is a significant upzoning, and what are the trade-offs there? So, thank you.
And we also, at our first modules that we looked at in the beginning, I remember you all brought up with Code Studio, ways to structure things so that we will incentivize having hopefully more affordable units. And they have done that whole analysis on how you actually can achieve affordable housing. This is based on data, their recommendations. So I think, I think, that's in the works, but we need to also look at what because they have that national lens on, this is after years of having affordable housing density bonuses that haven't worked. So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and there are bonus structures already
Yes.
built into the RD district and all the RX and CX.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
just finding the balance between what's zoned now and what it could be zoned in the future, and what's the delta between the
Yeah.
two, and it's not easy.
No, it's not.
Thank you. Just one real quick last question, and I want to thank the work y'all have done as staff and then our consultant. Where is it going? Like, and this is probably for larger sites, but the idea that the set aside of land, I think it got, Aaron, you're aware of it. I think because of what the housing work that's happened, that was one of the ideas, was to get through the process quicker. Like, you got the time, you didn't have to come for a rezoning because you'd set aside a portion of the land towards affordable housing. I think you and Ted you presented about that. We were all together at the housing convening a month and a half ago.
Yeah, what we were talking about was not necessarily that there's a set aside of land that would get you out of a rezoning, but rather that there would be triggers within the new UDO that would allow for increased density if you were providing. Yeah, okay. Yeah, and I believe that's still in there. The RD as currently drafted allows for multifamily. And Bo can correct me on this if need be, but RD allows for multifamily development if you're providing a certain percentage or a certain allotment of affordable units. That is continuing to be in the new UDO.
Yeah, I'll follow up. I don't think it was more about, I mean, you were in that land use group, but it was essentially that it would help lower the cost of potentially of a private landowner, right? That they would take a lower amount upfront, knowing that they weren't going to have to go through rezoning and spend all.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So that's what I'm trying to understand.
So simply that not having to go through a legislative process reduces risk, which reduces cost for the developer. And the theory there being that they would be more receptive in theory to using those tools that are embedded within the new UDO to allow them to avoid.
Go by right plan because they've got
Correct.
these certain metrics, whatever they are.
Correct.
Okay. And so you're saying that is currently already embedded.
That's already embedded in
Okay,
there.
so again, could we see examples of that, like drawn, like examples of what does that look like? I want to understand, I'm an applicant,
Mhm.
right, coming forward. What are my options? Like, I'm going to choose a path A or I'm going to choose path B, and so that we can really get to the because we know like density bonuses haven't worked or whatnot, and I understand this is all again, like, is this gonna be the carrot that works? We don't know, right? But I would like to understand, like, here are my options as an applicant. And am I going to be incentivized enough to avoid, a rezoning, right? Does that make sense?
Do some test cases.
Correct.
Kind of like, yeah, and that happens in some of these processes. Is that something that, I don't remember seeing that in the scope, so it's something that's possible?
So, do you wanna,
Yeah, so that's not something that is in the scope, but that is something that we can look at. The district standards have these little diagrams that kind of show, and I'm looking at like the RX ones right now, kind of the base, and then you could get more stories if you do this compact, you get unlimited stories or, additional stories, if you do the affordable. So that starts to give you a sense of like what you're talking about. I will say that having done a lot of test fits many, many years ago, they can give you a sense, but every site is so specific that they can also be misleading. And so I think we can talk, and maybe what we do is we bring back some of these concepts again as a refresher on where we are, because I think we maybe fine tuned a little bit some of the original district standards.
So as a part of our engagement materials for the second module, we've had Code Studio put together examples of the possibilities in a couple of the districts. For subsequent module engagement, we're talking about showing some of these options. Similar to what you're suggesting. I will caution though that one of the things we're trying to do is provide maximum flexibility. And so like what Sarah's talking about, where we show RG50 and we showed you several months ago, right? Like you do this, this, and this. Our intention is to, in order to encourage the density or encourage those affordable units or compact units, allow the flexibility. And so what we show just may not be exactly what they could build. And so that we don't want to create a bait and switch with community members, right? Whether it be, some sort of arbitrary design element or something like. So we're really trying to walk the line on that. I know with module 3, and Lisa just brought this up with me. We want to talk about that a little bit with or display some of that with the subdivision standards, but getting into like the particular height of a building. No, we want, we want to allow that to be flexible for building.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And maybe it's gonna come and we're gonna have a better sense of it, but it's the same thing, it's to Charles' point with community, folks don't know what they're looking at. So, I don't want to do a bait and switch, but I want folks at least have a kind of sense of what is this built environment gonna look like for them, right?
Yeah, as both said, we can bring back and do a bit of a refresher with our updated kind of visual content.
Yeah, Lisa just told me that because he's already working on the RX district and getting out of this type of model. So.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you. Great discussion. I just also want to lift up, I totally support expanding agricultural uses, which the RB will help us. I did hear that from our Durham County staff, open space and real estate staff, that they were concerned about the loss of agricultural uses. Durham County is investing in a farm campus, 100-acre farm campus, very exciting. And we are a very small county with very limited land to start with. So we definitely want to make sure that we're not having unintended consequences. So I thank you for being proactive on that. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our meeting, and we will meet next. Right? Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Middleton would like an excused absence today, and I think probably Commissioner Valentine.
Yes, and I forgot, Commissioner Valentine texted both of us. So can we please request an excused absence for Commissioner Valentine and Mayor Pro Tem Middleton?
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved by Councilmember Baker, seconded by Commissioner Lee. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that motion is approved unanimously. Our next meeting is August 6th, 2025. Everyone have a safe and
wonderful July. And you all deserve a break.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.